week. And then, wait, this is not the right thing. And then we will go over to learning a little bit about rigging. It should be it's mostly just like really basic joint stuff, and then next week we'll get a little bit more into the actual how to set up like specific rigs for like specific functionality that you might need. So the first assignment that we have is the flour sack assignment, which for some reason I always call sack attack. But basically I have a little rig, and I'll show you guys the rig in a minute. And you're just going to put that little rigged flour sack into an environment with some kind of obstacle or gap that the flour sack character has to jump over or interact with. So basically, I'm not going to hold you to like he must jump over something, or like I just kind of want him to be doing something cute and interesting in the scene, like interacting with the objects. The sort of jump or fall or whatever is mostly just like a thing to get you thinking about how like the physics of jumping and falling, if that makes sense. So like make sure it doesn't look floaty, that kind of thing. Basic requirements for this, 10 to 20 seconds long. If you want to do 20 seconds or like longer than 20 seconds, you're welcome to. Do use the sack rig that I've provided. I'd linked it in, there's a little Google Drive where you can download that, so that's linked in the assignment itself, and I think, yeah. Also, please add some kind of texture to the flour sack so it actually looks nice. And there should be some kind of story being communicated. And it doesn't have to be like super crazy elaborate. You don't need to put like 30 of these guys in and like have them do a battle or anything. But again, just think of like, why is the little dude moving in the direction that he's moving? Should he sort of look excited or terrified, that kind of thing. Just make sure his motivations are clear. And then generic suggestions for like, make nice environments and nice lighting for more points. And then this assignment is sort of focusing on taking this rigged character, which is going to have a lot more control than you would have over like blend shapes. So really try to emphasize the life and personality of this little flour sack, and also use realistic motion. Realistic motion in terms of physics. Feel free to like squish and stretch him as much as you want. But again, focusing on kind of like life and personality and overall like smoothness of the animations. This is also just like as a weird tidbit. If you've never worked with a rig before, this is a good time to sort of play with a rig that is like 97% functional. It's the same rig that I used 6 years ago to do this assignment. So it's old, but like works. And see if you don't despise using rigs for your final, and if that might be something you want to look into. Any questions about like the requirements for this? I'll show you a little sample of actually my animation, because it's the only one I can find. But any questions so far? All right. So I changed the point breakdown a little bit for how I do things. Model, texture, lighting, quality, pretty much all the same criteria, just slightly different point values. I changed originality to originality and project ambition. So project ambition being like, did you do something sort of really basic with your assignment, where like if the assignment was like, do a walk cycle, you just did like a really generic sort of like stiff walk cycle, versus something more ambitious where you're like, oh, the guy has like just been stabbed in the side and he's like limping along, or like, it's like that kind of thing. So it kind of like couples together, or like, did you try to do something really crazy with bend deformers, or like, again, like kind of going above and beyond to try to do something a little bit more ambitious than was required. So that's what that is, if that makes sense. Are there any questions on that? All right. And again, animation quality, I'm mostly grading on like, does the motion seem as realistic as it can get for a moving flour sack, and do your characters have life and personality and spunk? What to submit? Just a video following the standard formatting guidelines. I've removed the requirement about reference. For better or worse, though I do still advise you to use reference if you're so inclined. It will make your animations possibly faster to do and more accurate, because you'll be working off like real world examples, which may just involve you sort of running around covered in a blanket. But I don't know, still always good to use reference. But yeah, so that's the sack attack, or the sack assignment. Any questions on that? All right. Really quick, let me just see if I can find myself on Vimeo for 5 seconds. Oh, no, okay. Wrong one. Just like find my super sketchy old assignment. So this is, like I said, this was my assignment for the sack attack. I don't have any that were provided, so this is what you got. And the video compression was horrible in this case. But yeah, so I mean, you can see I've done something where I like turned him into like coffee beans. He's actually really fun to texture. And then I was like just trying to do something kind of goofy with like, I don't really know why, but for some reason he has a limp. So that was kind of my like trying to make it more interesting. And he just casually falls off a table. So that was, again, just sort of like my weird version of this assignment. So again, you have like control over the ears. I tried to give him like a little bit of secondary motion with like floppy ears. One thing I will say is like the way that he gets back up is absolutely terrible, and you guys should totally try to do better. Like he just floats back up into place, and it looks really bad. Like, it's very awkward. So again, like in that case, like if I ever went back to this, which I am totally never going to, but like I would have maybe like had him shove himself up, like push himself up with his face or something like that. So that's kind of what I'm looking for this particular assignment. Just for grins, I think this might actually be an animation 2 thing, I'm not sure, but I like made the sack or like the same little coffee sack debut again in another assignment. I'm just gonna show that to you because I have it. Yeah. So like, get weird with it. Sometimes the rig gets a little strange if you start like wrapping it over the edge of cans or something insane, but for the most part, it should do what you need it to. So I'm actually going to, did you actually not download my, oh no, you're in, okay. All right, so here's the stupid little flour sack rig. So this is, again, the rig that you guys are gonna be working with. If you need to just like move him around in the scene and like position him on top of a counter, you're going to grab this ginormous control that's covered in arrows, and that's the one you're going to use to, again, just like move him around. You can rotate him so you can like start at an angle if you need it to. If you scale this, it will explode the rig, so don't scale it. But yeah, so this is, again, not something you're going to use to animate. It's literally just for positioning him in the scene when you first start. Apart from that, he does have a bunch of controls, so you can grab and just kind of like play with it and like see what it can do, honestly. But like he has little controls for some like squash and stretch, which has actually been done pretty nicely. So if you need to like make him really mushy, you can do that. You can sort of bend him around. He has little controls for all of his ears. So again, you can control these manually if you want to, just with these, the controllers actually on the ears. These little floating ones have some custom attributes like I talked about, I think last week. Can't keep track of time anymore, but you can use those to, again, just sort of like control the ear curvature if that's something that you need to do, just like sweeping motions of it. Legs have a similar thing, so this is actually the hip control. What is this? I always kind of forget what these rigs do. Yeah, so he has like weirdly tall hip control. Other just like individual little foot controls. So you should be able to get like a pretty good amount of motion with this. And apart from this being really wonky to scale, again, it should be a fully functional rig. If you need to select the little guy's skin, if you are looking in your channel box in the display layers, the Geo tab has his skin in it so you don't accidentally select it. There's also one for the controls if you need to like just quickie turn them on and off. So I'm just going to set this to not be referenced, grab his skin, and just show you the UVs for that really quick. So they should be set up so you can do something pretty reasonable where like here's the front and then there's like a seam running down the whole back of, like the center back of the flour sack. So it should be fairly easy to get a decent texture on this guy. You shouldn't need to like re-UV him or anything like that. But I would just recommend throwing him into Maya, playing around with how he works a little bit before starting to animate, just so you know kind of like what you have to work with. Yep.
Is he just like a big end cloth?
Nope, he's actually a piece of geometry that has been attached to a rig.
Oh. That when you like stretching him out, it looks like really like satisfying and stuff.
Oh yeah, no, this, I have never actually had to, had to put some stretch on a rig before, but this one does have a reasonable amount of implemented squash and stretch. And that's just like functionality that's been built into the rig. If you actually look at the geometry on this dude, he's actually really, really low poly. It's just like the smoothing. If you tried to run this with Encloth, it would look awful. But yeah, no. Cool. So that's basically the little rig. Any questions about that? All right. Again, that should be linked in the assignment itself. Pull up my stuff. All right. And then the other assignment for this week is to start working on your final models. So the SAC assignment is actually the last weekly assignment you guys will have. And from here on out, it's basically is just going to be working on the finals. So for this week, you are going to be blocking in something, again, usable, stressing the usable part, for each model of like your main character models, and also like major pieces of the environment. And by usable, I mean, so if you guys are going to be using at least deformers on your characters, probably, if not rigs, so make sure that you have the topology in there to support that. If there's something that looks like there's really, really weird edge flow or like really obvious pulling in the static model that's like not being animated, the second you put a rig or a deformer on that, it's going to highlight that like tenfold and possibly cause some really weird issues with like clipping. So again, I would rather you guys spend a little bit of extra time and make some like really like stuff that you can actually use or like build on in the future rather than just like, oh crap, it's 2 hours before the assignment's due, like let me just get something that kind of looks like a fork in, if that makes sense. Does it make sense? Okay. I don't know. I hate doing just like extra work for the sake of doing extra work that I have to redo, so I'm like trying to avoid you guys having to do that as well. But anyway, so suggestions to earn more points, just like the more complete stuff is, obviously the more points you're going to get. And if you have like most of your scene modeled in versus like your characters and like some environment stuff, that's also going to get you more points. More or less what I'm expecting is, again, all of the characters, and if there's like major environment stuff that they need to be interacting with, to be blocked in some kind of reasonably complete state, and then have sort of something there for roughly a quarter of your scene. And that doesn't need to be like super crazy fancy, but maybe like just start getting if you have like a kitchen counter filled with jars or plates, start blocking in, again, something where you can start building that in later. And however you do something that makes sense for how you like to model. If it makes sense to make like one plate and just sort of like I have a bunch of plates which I'll populate later. That's also totally fine. I'm shooting for the stuff that's like supposed to be more like complete models. Something more than just like basic geometry like cubes and cylinders is preferable. And then just like as a weird side note, this is not something that I'm requiring or looking for specifically, but you may, if you want to start rigging your main characters and just like playing with that so you can have, when we go over stuff next class for more specific like rigging stuff, you can come in with questions that we can try to go over and address any issues we might be having with that. Because if you've never done rigging before, usually there's like 1 or 2 issues that'll come up, and it can be kind of like a weird time suck, and it's definitely better to figure that out beforehand rather than later. So basically I'll just be grading you for this, the characters. Half the grade is just like the character model, like shape and topology. On a basic level, does the thing look like the thing you were trying to make? And again, for topology, like if you're gonna bend this around, does the topology support that? Do you have enough geometry? Are there any like really weird pulling areas, that kind of thing? And then kind of the same thing for the environment models, except I'm not really looking so much for topology, mostly just like how much stuff did you get done and is it done at a decent level? For what to submit, just like one Maya scene is fine. I guess you could give me an OBJ if you wanted to, but I prefer a Maya scene. Please include all of your objects in that scene, so all of your environment stuff, your model stuff, labeled in some kind of logical way. So like if I click on something, I'm like, I can't really tell what that is. And I click on it in the outliner and it says like potato character. I'm like, I see, it's a potato. Like, again, it should be obvious, if not from the model what I'm looking at, then like from the labeling. And then unhidden. So when I say unhidden, I just mean like whatever I import into Maya from your scene, everything that I'm supposed to be looking at should be displayed in the scene. anything I'm not supposed to be looking at should either be deleted or hidden. I really don't want to pick, I don't want to pick through your stuff to see what I should be looking at, what I shouldn't be. But also, if I have to play guessing games, I might be looking at stuff that I shouldn't be looking at by accident and being like, wow, this is completely unfinished, when that was like a previous version of the model or something like that. So again, just make sure that whatever I'm supposed to be looking at is the only thing displayed when I open the scene. That's pretty much this. Anyone have any questions on that? All right, cool. Great, so that is the assignments. Do you guys want to do, so we're running like kind